I want to, in these few moments, I understand that we have been wrestling with analyzing our 400-year sojourn here in these disunited states of America. And so I'm going to piggyback on what we have been discussing this month and simply talk about the faith that the dark past has taught us, the faith that the dark past has taught us. I believe it's Kendrick Lamar who raps about our reality. For generations, we've been dealt bad hands with bad plans. Of course, Kendrick Lamar is using the metaphor of either playing cards or dominoes. And when you were dealt a bad hand that is undermined further by a bad plan, it's a reflection, Lamar laments, of our predicament as a people as we have made sojourn in these disunited states of America. Of course, Kendrick Lamar is piggybacking on the poetic brilliance of James Weldon Johnson, who declared, "Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the day when hope unborn had died." With that being the case, I could not help but reflect on the amazing artistic genius of Kara Walker. Kara Walker has a painting that is at the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., and it's entitled "No World." Don't miss it, No World. If you allow me to use the screen of your anointed imagination, see the caption, "No World." Under, here it is, a painting, don't miss this, of a ship that has landed on the shores of the East Coast, and that ship, of course, has cargo. It has cargo filled with black bodies, and the cargo, watch this, has come to what she calls no world. I hope you're getting it, because she's playing on the concept of a new world. According to Kara Walker, we did not land in a new world, but it became no world for us. And so for generations, we've been dealt bad hands with bad plans. I'm still not coming through. Some of you have seen in recent days what happened a few days ago. It was July 17th of this year. American Airlines flight 2834 was scheduled to fly from Miami, Florida to Nassau, Bahamas, but the flight could not take off because of the fact that a mechanic was caught, don't miss this, was caught sabotaging the system. The flight was scheduled to take off, and using my anointed imagination, there were persons on the flight in first class, but they could not take off. Why? Because the system had been sabotaged. They wanted to go somewhere. They had paid their fare. They had dreams of going to the beautiful Bahamian Islands, but they could not go where they wanted to go because the system had been sabotaged. While they were seated waiting on the plane, I'm sure there were those who were comforted them by way of the flight attendants with snacks, trying to keep them comfortable. Others may have fallen asleep. They had adjusted to not taking off. They could not take off. Here it is, because prior to takeoff, the system had been sabotaged. I hang out right here because as we reflect on 400 years, why is it that certain communities have been targeted for an inability to take off? Sure, there are those of us in first class, but don't forget that the system at the beginning has been sabotaged, precluding us from taking off. Y'all not feeling me? I'll go ahead and make it real plain. How is it that even today, black people, when they go to the hospital, are seen as more tolerant of pain than others? It's because from the very beginning, the system has been sabotaged. You're still not getting it. How is it, my sisters and brothers, that we desperately fund public education so the have-gots get more and the have-nots get less, and we still got to pass the same standardized test? It's because from the beginning, the system has been sabotaged. I'm still not coming through. Climate change manifesting itself in environmental injustice and environmental racism is seen in the fact that sadly there are more incinerators on our side of town, not to mention those machines that sabotage health and create asthma and lung disease. They are on our side of town. And so when you marry that with food insecurity that is reinforced by food deserts, it means that David Williams of Harvard is right. Our life expectancy is not determined by our genetic code, but by our zip code. And all of that is precluding us from taking off, not because we are less than, not because we are lazy, but because the system has been sabotaged and precluded us from taking off. I see you looking at me and you're talking about how well some of us are doing. Well, we got it like that. Some of us are in first class, but the bottom line is the whole plane can't take off because the system has been sabotaged. And since the system has been sabotaged, the question is, it's sabotage. We landed on in no world. What can we do? There's a wonderful passage. Since I'm in church, I hope you don't mind me lifting up a text. The text is familiar. It's Hebrews chapter 12. And there in Hebrews chapter 12, the Hebrew herald declares defiantly, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside the weight and sin that is weighing us down and run with endurance the race that is set before us. Now, you missed your shout, so let me go ahead and help you get your shout on. The verse begins with therefore. That's a conjunction. Now, I'm not smart like Reverend Jackson Santita, not to mention Todd Yeary. I didn't always know what a conjunction was, but one Saturday morning, back in the day, I'm watching cartoons. A song came on. The song said conjunction, junction, what's that function? And discovered that the function of a conjunction is to connect what's before with what's after. And so when you see the conjunction therefore, it means you've got to read what's before therefore so you can find out what therefore is there for. Preach, Freddie Haynes, I just did. And that means you've got to go back to chapter 11, and there in the 11th chapter of Hebrews we discover that without faith you can't please God. And then we have a listing, here's your shout right here, of the Hebrew hall of faith. And there in that hall of faith we hear of Enoch walking with God. We see Noah building an ark. We hear Moses refusing to go along with injustice, and we discover that all of them died in the faith, not having received the promise. They died in the faith. They died working for what they had not obtained yet. I'm still not coming through in a real sense. Hebrews chapter 11 is a look in the rearview mirror of what those who had gone before their ancestors had done. And in light of what their ancestors had done, the Hebrew herald says in verse 1, now here's what you do. Therefore, since we are surrounded by their witness, we have a responsibility. They've done their part. It's up to us to do our part. I guess you're not getting it. I guess I've got to quote, who is it? The late great Nipsey Hussle. Nipsey rapped for us. Nipsey said, this ain't for entertainment. This is for my people on them slave ships. These songs, just the spirituals. I swam against them waves with. Y'all feeling Nipsey? Because Nipsey is saying, when I think about what we experienced on the slave ships, the hell we overcame, if we could overcome that, guess what? We can keep on swimming. And if you keep on swimming, you'll end up shore, much to the amazement of others who didn't think you could make it. Y'all didn't feel Nipsey? Well, let me go with Langston Hughes speaking through a mother to her son. Well, son, I tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in its splinters, boards torn up, places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the while I've been a climbing on, reaching landings, turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So child, don't you quit now. Don't you sit down on this steps because you find it's kind of hard. I still climbing, I still going, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair. Well, in light of that, what is this text saying? This text is saying, don't allow what's around you to get you down. Instead, be uplifted by who's behind you that's still rooting for you. I just said something and y'all missed your shout. Let me do it one more time. Don't get depressed by what's around you. Instead, be inspired by those behind you who are now rooting for you to do what they've done, because it's your turn to pick up the baton and run with endurance the race that is set before us. I got to go ahead and shout myself since y'all missed this. You see, this is a depressing time in which we live. It's depressing that Professor Eddie Glaude Jr. is right in that America continues to live in a state of delusion. And so Gore Duvall calls us the United States of amnesia. And in amnesia, it means America likes to edit her history and begin in the middle of the book instead of going to the very beginning of the book, because in the middle you can edit out that which is unpleasant. And so Professor Glaude Jr. says we like to believe in an innocence of this nation that betrays the reality. We were born in sin. We were shaped in injustice. While we were proclaiming the values of liberty and justice, the same architects of that Constitution and Declaration were engaged in slavery. So the brilliant sister who birthed the 1619 Project, Nicole, says we were not born a democracy, we were born a slaveocracy. And the slaveocracy was a contradiction to what was the reality, a contradiction to what was espoused in the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. And so all of that is downright depressing. But here's what the Hebrew writer does. The Hebrew writer says, look back in chapter 11 and remember, by faith Moses, who engaged in revolution that was redemptive against repression, by faith look at Noah building though he didn't see the rain coming. By faith see Enoch walking with God. By faith see Moses doing what Moses did. And y'all, it hit me. If they can have a chapter 11 of their book, we've got a chapter 11 of our own book. May I go ahead and call the roll right quick? By faith we survived the hell of the Middle Passage. By faith we gave birth to the black church as a protest movement that created an alternative community that was beloved in a world of faith. By faith, y'all still missing your shout. By faith we sang spirituals in the midst of insufferable situations. By faith, when they gave us blues, we put rhythm in front of it and gave birth to rhythm and blues, to use the language of Charles G. Adams. By faith we gave birth to Frederick Douglass, who became the silver-tongued prophet of freedom and taught himself how to read and write and declared that abolition was the future of this nation. By faith Sojourner Truth changed her name from Isabella Bomfrey, and when she changed her name, she changed her identity. By faith Harriet Tubman refused to stay enslaved but escaped to her own emancipation and then went back to get others to become free. And now they're arguing over how many times she went back. I don't care how many times she went back. Harriet went back and she did it by faith. By faith Ida B. Wells stood against lynching. By faith Paul Robeson used his platform and poetically declared injustice was wrong in this nation. By faith Rosa took a stand by maintaining her seat and said, I'm standing against second-class citizenship. By faith Martin started to march, and because he marched, the walls of Jim Crow segregation came tumbling down. And by faith Jesse Louis Jackson in 84 and 88 picked up the baton and swept a new generation of political leadership into power. You don't have black power in politics today without Jesse Jackson in 84 and 88. By faith, Jesse Jackson said when we had persons that were kidnapped overseas that he refused to just do nothing, and he got on a plane and went and rescued Goodman. He rescued individuals who had been given up on by this country, and he did it by faith. By faith, the Black Lives Matter movement declares, stay woke. I'm simply trying to say we've been doing this thing by faith, and since we've been doing it by faith, I'm done. Here's what the text says. The text says, let us now keep our eyes on the prize and run with endurance the race that is in front of us. You see, it's one thing to appreciate what Reverend Jackson has done. It's another thing to get up off of your blessed assurance and do what God has called you to do for such a time as this. You've got to have that same faith to fight environmental injustice. You've got to have that same faith that takes a stand with our children across the world yesterday who declared they're not going to be the last generation, but they're going to fight to save this planet. And when we do that, we've got to go down to Cancer Alley in Louisiana. When we do that, we've got to get rid of lead in the water in Flint, Michigan. When we do that, we've got to remove all of those unhealthy institutions that toxify and poison our communities. We've got to do that in this generation by faith. We've got to stand against homeless. We've got to stand against those who would attack the homeless. Reverend Jackson is right. This week, 46 minus 1 attacked the homeless, and 46 minus 1 needs to hear from Jesus right now, because Jesus in the judgment is going to say, I was hungry and you cut aid to dependent children. I was thirsty and you poisoned the water in Flint, Michigan. I was a stranger and you built a wall along the southern border and told Bahamians who were suffering after Dorian that they could not come to our shores. I was in prison because of mass incarceration, and Trump is going to say, Jesus, when did I do that stuff? And Jesus is going to say, inasmuch as you did it to the least of these my sisters and brothers, you've also done it unto me. I'm simply trying to say now is the time to do what the text says. The text says run with endurance. The text says run with endurance. I'm trying not to shout, but etymologically I had to unpack the structure of the word right there for run. It also means contend, fight. Oh, you didn't shout. Fight with endurance. Fight. You got to fight. You've got to fight. It's really a sporting metaphor. You agree? And it's saying use the same, use in your own life the athletic brilliance of Muhammad Ali and Michael Jordan and all of those great athletes like Serena Williams. I'm not getting this like I need to. I simply say fight. Can I quote you right quick, Reverend Jackson? Reverend Jackson reminds us that Muhammad Ali was fighting Henry Cooper over in England, and when Henry Cooper caught him with the hook that knocked Ali down, Ali goes down, but guess what? He didn't stay down. He got right back up, and when he got right back up, the next round he defeats and knocks out Cooper with the TKO. After the fight was over, you know they had to ask Ali some questions. A reporter says, champ, why did you get back up so fast after Cooper knocked you down? And y'all know what he said, the ground ain't no place for a champion. He got back on up and he fought and he kept on fighting until he fought, who was it? Sonny Liston. And there he defeated Sonny Liston, and they had the nerve to say the fight was fixed. Even though he had whooped up on Liston, they said it was fixed. And then he fought him again, knocked him out in round 1, and they said the fight was fixed. I'm about to shout you because Ali can't clap back and said, yeah, there was fixed with my fist. That's how it got fixed. And simply, I'm trying to let everyone know right now that this fight is fixed. The fight for justice is fixed. The fight for freedom is fixed. But we still got to fight. The fight to make this world a better place, it's already fixed. I know it's fixed because I serve a Savior who died on a cross on Sunday. But before he died, he told Pilate, this thing is already fixed. I'm about to go down, but nobody takes my life. I lay it down, and if I lay it down, I'll pick it back up again. So y'all just know the fight is fixed. And because the fight is fixed, in this world you shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. The fight is fixed because no weapon formed against you is going to prosper. The fight is fixed because my Bible tells me weeping may endure for a night, but joy is coming in the morning. Y'all still not shouting. Well, here's your shout right here. I open with Kendrick. I'm going to close with Kendrick. Kendrick says the fight is fixed. All my life I had to fight, but if God's got us, we then going to be all right because the fight is fixed and we shall overcome.